The first time I noticed the train tickets, I thought my wife had made a mistake. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was checking our joint bank account because I was paying a few bills before bed. There was a charge for £31.60. Train line. I didn't think much of it. Emma occasionally took the train into the city. Sometimes she'd meet an old friend for lunch or go shopping without me. We'd been married for 21 years, and I wasn't the kind of husband who checked every little thing she spent money on. I almost closed the banking app. Then I noticed the destination. Ashford. I stared at it for a second. Ashford wasn't where Emma normally went. In fact, I couldn't remember the last time either of us had been there. I looked at the date. The ticket was for Friday. Departure time, 6:15 p.m. I shrugged and put my phone down. Emma? She was in the kitchen. Yeah? Are you going somewhere Friday? There was a short pause. Then she said, maybe. I smiled. That's a very specific answer. She came into the living room, drying her hands on a towel. What? I saw a train ticket. Her expression changed for half a second. It was so quick that, if I hadn't been looking directly at her, I probably wouldn't have noticed. A train ticket? Yeah, to Ashford. She looked away. I might need to go there. Okay. I waited. She didn't say anything else. So, are you going? She folded the towel. I don't know. I laughed. You've bought a ticket. I know. So why don't you know? She looked at me. I just don't. There was something about the way she said it that made the question feel bigger than it was. I let it go. Fine. She smiled faintly. Thanks. I didn't think about it again that night, or at least I tried not to. Friday came. Around 5:30, I was making dinner when I heard Emma moving around upstairs. A few minutes later, she came downstairs wearing a coat. She had her handbag over one shoulder. Going now? She stopped. Yeah, Ashford. She nodded. Do you want me to drive you to the station? No. The answer came too quickly. Then she softened. It's okay, I'll drive myself. Sure. She kissed my cheek. I won't be late. I watched her walk out. I didn't think anything was strange until later that night. It was almost 10 when I heard the front door open. Emma came inside. She wasn't carrying anything. No shopping bags, no food, nothing. You're back. Yeah. How was Ashford? She took off her coat. Fine. I looked at her. What did you do? Nothing. I smiled. You drove all the way to Ashford to do nothing? She didn't smile back. I didn't go. I frowned. What? I didn't go to Ashford. I looked at her. You said you were going. I changed my mind. I thought about the train ticket. So you drove to the station and came back? She hesitated. Something like that. I didn't push her, but something had changed. Not in the house, not visibly. It was just a feeling. A tiny crack in something I'd always assumed was solid. The next morning, I checked the bank account again. I don't know why. Maybe because I'd been curious. Maybe because part of me wanted to prove I had imagined the whole thing. There was another train line charge. £31.60. Ashford, the following month. Again, 6:15 p.m. I stared at the screen. Then I checked the previous month's transactions. There it was. Another one. Same destination, same departure time. I opened the details. The ticket had already been used. I frowned. That couldn't be right. Emma had told me she hadn't gone. I clicked on the ticket. It showed the date, the departure. And beneath it, unused. I checked the next one. Unused. Then the one before that. Unused. I sat there staring at the screen. 3 tickets. 3 different dates. Same route. Same time. None of them used. I heard Emma walking down the stairs. I quickly locked my phone. She walked into the kitchen. Morning. Morning. She opened the cupboard. You okay? Yeah. She looked at me. You seem distracted. I was just checking the bank. She nodded. Anything wrong? No. I almost told her. Instead I said, nothing. She made coffee. We talked about ordinary things. The weather, work, a bill that needed paying, our son calling us that weekend. Everything was normal. And somehow that made it worse, because now I knew there was something Emma wasn't telling me. A few days later, I noticed another thing. She had started keeping her handbag in the bedroom instead of the hallway. She'd never done that before. One evening, she left it on the chair while she went upstairs. I wasn't looking for anything. At least, that's what I told myself. I walked past it, stopped, then kept walking. I made it halfway down the hallway before turning around. I stood there staring at the bag. I hated what I was thinking. I didn't want to become the kind of husband who searched through his wife's things. So I walked away. 5 minutes later, I came back. The house was quiet. I opened the bag. Inside were the usual things: her wallet, keys, lip balm, a packet of tissues, her glasses. Then I saw an envelope, white, folded in half. I took it out. There was no name on it. I opened it. Inside was a train ticket. Ashford, 6:15 p.m. The date was almost 3 years old. I looked at it again. Then I noticed something written on the back. 4 numbers, 18 out of 10 divided by 23. I knew that date. I knew it immediately. I put the ticket back. I closed the bag. And I stood there in the hallway for a long time. October 18th. That was the day Lily had gone into the hospital. Our daughter had been 5 years old. And suddenly, the train tickets weren't just strange anymore. They were connected to the worst day of our lives. I didn't know why. I didn't know what Ashford had to do with Lily, and I didn't know why Emma had been buying the same ticket over and over again. But for the first time, I wondered if my wife wasn't trying to go somewhere. Maybe she was trying to return to something. I didn't say anything to Emma about the ticket. Not that night. Not the next morning either. I kept telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe she'd bought the tickets for someone else. Maybe she had planned to visit Ashford and changed her mind. Maybe the date on the back meant something completely different. But I knew what October 18th meant. It was the day Lily went into the hospital. Our daughter had been sick for several days before that. At first it looked like nothing serious. A fever, a cough, a tiredness that seemed normal for a 5-year-old who wasn't sleeping well. Then one morning, Emma called me at work. Her voice sounded different. "David, I think something's wrong." I left immediately. By the time I got home, Lily was barely awake. I still remember Emma carrying her to the car. I remember the way Lily's head rested against her mother's shoulder. I remember thinking we'd be home that night. I remember being completely wrong. The hospital in our town admitted Lily that afternoon. They ran tests, more tests, then more. Everything happened so quickly that I barely understood what the doctors were saying. By evening, they told us they wanted to move her to a specialist hospital in Ashford. That was the last part I remembered clearly. After that, everything became a blur. But there was one thing I had never heard before: a train. I sat at the kitchen table and opened my phone. I searched the old railway route. The journey still existed, the station still existed, and the train still left at almost exactly the same time, 6:15 p.m. I stared at the screen. Then I searched our old address: Ashford, the hospital, the station. They were all connected. My stomach tightened. Emma had been buying tickets for the same train, the train she had never told me about. I waited until she left for work. Then I went upstairs. I opened the wardrobe. At the back was the old storage box we'd kept since Lily died. We hadn't opened it in years. I carried it downstairs. I sat on the floor and opened the lid. For a few seconds I couldn't move. There were Lily's things: a pink jumper, a stuffed rabbit, a pair of tiny shoes, a birthday card she'd made for Emma, a photograph of the 3 of us at the seaside. I picked up the photograph. Lily was sitting on my shoulders. Emma was standing beside us. All 3 of us were smiling. I put it down. Underneath it was a folder. I recognized it immediately. Hospital documents. I almost closed the box. Instead, I opened the folder. There were pages I'd seen before: admission notes, test results, medication records. Then I found something I'd never seen: a transfer form. I read it once, then again: patient, Lily Carter. Transfer destination, Ashford Children's Hospital. My hands went cold. There was a time written underneath: departure coordination, 18:15. I stared at the number, 6:15, the exact same time Emma had been buying tickets for. I sat back against the sofa. For years, I'd believed the transfer had happened by ambulance. That was what I'd always assumed. But there was no ambulance record in the folder. Instead, the document mentioned something called parent travel arrangements. I didn't understand it. I kept reading. Then I found a note from one of the doctors. The handwriting was difficult to read, but one sentence was clear: Mother advised to travel ahead if able. I stopped. Mother, Emma, travel ahead, by train. I suddenly remembered something. That night, the night Lily died, Emma had been sitting beside her bed when I arrived at the hospital. I remembered asking, "Why aren't you at Ashford?" She had looked at me. Then she'd said, "They said there's no point." At the time, I hadn't questioned it. Lily's condition had deteriorated. Everything had been happening too quickly. I had simply accepted what Emma told me. Now I wondered if there had been more. I heard the front door open. I quickly put the papers back. Emma was home earlier than usual. "David." I closed the box. "Up here." She walked into the living room, then stopped when she saw the box. Her face went completely still. "What are you doing?" I looked at her. "I found something." She didn't move. "The train tickets." Her eyes dropped. I continued. I know what the date means. She sat down slowly. I placed the transfer document on the table. Why didn't you tell me? She stared at the paper. I didn't think you'd ever find it. That doesn't answer the question. She swallowed. I didn't want you to know. Why? She looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw something in her expression that wasn't sadness. It was fear. I need you to promise me something. What? Don't ask me to explain it yet. I stared at her. You've been buying those tickets for 3 years. I know. You've been going to the station. She looked away. You've been standing there at 6:15. She said nothing. How do you know that? Her eyes came back to mine. Because I've been doing it. The room went silent. I felt a strange mixture of anger and confusion. Why? She looked down at her hands. I don't know how to tell you without changing everything. I almost laughed. Emma, our daughter died 19 years ago. Whatever you're about to tell me can't change that. She closed her eyes. You don't understand. Then help me understand. She opened her eyes. I can't. I stood up. Then I'm going to figure it out myself. She grabbed my hand. David, please. I looked at her. I am not asking you to stop. Her voice was shaking. I'm asking you not to go looking for answers before I'm ready. I pulled my hand away. You've had 19 years. She flinched. I immediately regretted saying it, but the words were already there. She looked at the transfer document again. Then she whispered, I didn't have 19 years. I frowned. What does that mean? She looked at me. I only found out about the train 3 years ago. That stopped me. I stared at her. You didn't know? She shook her head. Not until I found the file. And then you started buying tickets. She nodded. Why? Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at the old photograph of Lily, then at me. Because I needed to know what would have happened if I'd gotten on. I felt something inside me drop. I didn't know what she meant, but suddenly, the tickets didn't look like evidence of another life. They looked like evidence of a question my wife had been asking herself for 3 years. A question I had never known existed. I couldn't let it go. For the rest of that evening, the transfer form stayed on the table between us. Emma didn't touch it. Neither did I. Eventually, I said, Tell me what you found 3 years ago. She looked at the clock. I don't know where to start. Start with the file. She took a breath. Lily's medical records were being moved to digital storage. The hospital contacted me because they needed confirmation about some old paperwork. And you found the transfer form? Yes. What did you think when you saw it? She looked at me. I thought it was wrong. Why? Because I remembered that night differently. I waited, she continued. I remembered being told that Lily was too sick to move. I remembered being told that there was nothing more they could do. You told me that too. I know. So what changed? The paperwork. She touched the edge of the transfer form. It said she had been considered for transfer. Considered? Yes. So it wasn't definite. I know that now. But you didn't know that 3 years ago. She shook her head. When I saw the time, I remembered the train. I stared at her. You remembered the train? I remembered being told there was one. The room seemed to get smaller. Why didn't you tell me? She looked down. Because I was ashamed. Of what? Of remembering. I didn't understand. She looked at me. I had spent years telling myself that night was out of my hands. Then suddenly I had a piece of paper telling me there had been a decision I could have made. You didn't know that at the time. I know. But you were still blaming yourself. She nodded. I started thinking about it every day. And that's when you started buying the tickets. Yes. I looked at the dates. Why every month? She hesitated. I don't know. You must. I don't. She rubbed her hands together. At first it was just once. She explained that 3 years ago she'd bought a ticket for the anniversary of Lily's hospitalization. She had gone to the station. She had stood on the platform. The train arrived, and she couldn't get on. The following month she did it again. Then again. Eventually it became something she couldn't stop. Why don't you just stop buying them? She gave me a sad smile. Because every time I think I'm done, I start wondering again. Wondering what? She looked at me. What if I had gone? I didn't know what to say. I'd asked myself versions of that question for years. What if I'd left work earlier? What if I'd understood how sick Lily was? What if I'd asked more questions? What if I'd been there? I'd never said those things aloud. Maybe neither had she. I sat down beside her. Emma, the doctor told you to stay. No. She shook her head. He didn't tell me to stay. I looked at her. What? He said I should travel ahead if I could. The words came quietly. I was supposed to go. I stared at her. Then why didn't you? She closed her eyes. Because Lily was asleep. I waited. She'd been crying for hours. She finally fell asleep. I was holding her hand when the nurse came in. Emma's voice began to shake. She said the transfer might happen. She said there was a train. She said I could go ahead and wait for her. And you stayed. Yes. Why? She looked at me. Because Lily opened her eyes. I felt my chest tighten. She looked at me and asked me not to leave. Emma wiped her face. She was 5, David. She didn't understand what was happening. She just knew people kept moving around her and talking about taking her somewhere else. She took a breath. She asked me to stay. I looked down at the floor. And you stayed. Yes. And then? She got worse. Emma's voice became almost a whisper. By the time they were ready to move her, they said she wasn't stable enough. I looked at the document again. So the transfer never happened? No. And you never told me there had been a possibility. I couldn't. Why? Because I was afraid you'd ask why I stayed. I looked at her. I would never have blamed you. She gave me a look that broke my heart. You say that now. I mean it. You don't know what you would have felt. I couldn't argue with that, because I didn't. For 19 years I had thought I knew the story. Now I realized I knew only the version we'd both been able to survive. I picked up the transfer form again. There has to be more. Emma shook her head. There isn't. Then why keep buying the tickets? She stared at the paper. Because I needed to stand there. Why? Because I wanted to know what it felt like to have the choice. I didn't understand. She continued. I kept thinking that if I stood on that platform at 6:15, I might finally understand why I stayed. And do you? She shook her head. No. A long silence followed. Then I asked the question I'd been afraid to ask. Do you think Lily would have survived if you'd gone? Emma looked at me. I don't know. It was the first time she'd said it without trying to defend herself. I don't know, she repeated. That is why I keep going back. I looked at her. Because you think maybe you could have saved her? Yes. And if you could prove that you couldn't? She looked away. I don't know what I'd do. That sentence stayed with me. Because suddenly I understood. Emma wasn't buying train tickets because she believed there was a secret answer waiting at the end of the journey. She was buying them because she couldn't live with not knowing. But there was still something that didn't make sense. I looked again at the transfer form. The recommendation had been made before 6:15. The train had been scheduled for 6:15. And Lily hadn't deteriorated beyond recovery until much later. If that was true, then there was one question I couldn't stop thinking about. Why had no one ever told us how serious the transfer option really was? I looked at Emma. Who was the doctor that night? She hesitated. I don't remember. You don't remember? It was 19 years ago. But you found the file 3 years ago. Yes. Did you look for him? She shook her head. Why not? Because I was afraid of what I'd find. I understood then that there was still another layer to the story. Emma had spent 3 years asking herself whether she should have taken that train, but neither of us actually knew what would have happened if she had, and for the first time, I wondered whether the answer might still exist somewhere in those old records. Not to change what happened, that was impossible, but maybe to finally tell my wife whether she had been punishing herself for something that was never hers to carry. The next morning, I woke up thinking about the doctor, not because I believed he had done anything wrong. I just couldn't stop thinking about what Emma had said. She had spent 3 years punishing herself over a decision she wasn't even sure had been hers to make. And I had spent 19 years believing we both understood what had happened. Apparently, neither of us did. I found Emma in the kitchen. She was standing by the window with a cup of coffee. You didn't sleep either, I said. She shook her head. No. I sat down. I want to find out what happened that night. She looked at me. Why? Because I don't want you spending another year buying those tickets because you think you killed our daughter. Her eyes filled with tears. You can't know that. No. I reached for her hand. But we can find out what the doctors actually knew. She didn't answer for a while. Then she nodded. Okay. We started with the hospital. The original hospital where Lily had been admitted was still operating, although most of the staff from 19 years ago were gone. I called the records department. It took several transfers and almost an hour before I reached someone who could help. I explained that we were looking for archived records from October 18th, 19 years earlier. The woman on the phone said there were still records available, but because of the age of the case, it might take time. She asked for Lily's name. I gave it to her. There was a pause. Then, I can see the admission. My heart started beating faster. Can you see the transfer notes? Some of them. Could you tell me what happened? I can't discuss the details over the phone. I understood. She said we could request a copy. We did. Then we waited. 3 days later, the envelope arrived. Emma wouldn't open it. She put it on the kitchen table and stared at it. "You do it," she said. I opened it. The first pages were familiar. Blood tests, observations, medication, notes about Lily's condition. Then I found the transfer section. I read it slowly. The specialist hospital in Ashford had been contacted. They had agreed to accept Lily if her condition stabilized enough for transport. The train was never intended to carry Lily. It was simply the fastest way for Emma to get to Ashford before the medical transfer. I looked at Emma. "You weren't supposed to take Lily on the train." She shook her head. "I know. You were supposed to go ahead." "Yes." I kept reading. Then I found something I'd never expected, a note written at 6:02 p.m. "Mother advised that transfer may be delayed due to patient's unstable condition." I looked at Emma. She stared at the page. That wasn't in the old file. What? The copy I found 3 years ago didn't have this. I read it again. So they were already worried the transfer might not happen. "Yes," I kept reading. At 6:18 p.m., another note. "Patient condition deteriorating. Transfer placed on hold." I looked at Emma. She covered her mouth. "So, I couldn't finish," she whispered. "I stayed because she was getting worse." "Yes, but I still could have gone." I shook my head. "You could have." She looked at me. "But the transfer was already being reconsidered." She nodded. "That doesn't mean I couldn't have gone." "No," I paused. "But it means you weren't choosing between staying and saving her." Emma looked at me. "You don't know that." "No." I held the paper between us. "But neither do you." She stared at the document. For the first time, I saw something change in her expression. Not relief. Not yet. Just uncertainty. Then I found another page. A consultation note from the specialist hospital. It had been written later that evening. The specialist had reviewed Lily's condition remotely. The recommendation was clear. Transfer not advised while patient remained unstable. I read it twice. Emma took the paper from my hand. Her eyes moved across the page. She started crying. "I thought I had stopped them." "What?" "I thought they were waiting for me." She looked at me. "I thought if I had gotten on that train, I would have been there when they needed me." I shook my head. "They were already putting the transfer on hold." She looked down. "But what if I'd gone anyway?" I sat beside her. "Then you would have arrived at Ashford while they were still deciding whether Lily was stable enough to move." She didn't respond. "What happened later?" I kept reading. The record showed that Lily's condition continued to deteriorate. The specialist team remained involved. Eventually, the transfer was abandoned completely. She died before morning. Emma closed her eyes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "So the train wouldn't have saved her?" I looked at her. "I don't know." She opened her eyes. "But it wouldn't have guaranteed anything." "No." She wiped her face. "That isn't the same thing." "I know." She looked at the ticket on the table, the one she'd bought for the following Friday. "I spent 3 years thinking there was one decision." She picked it up. "Stay or go." Her voice cracked. "But there wasn't." I shook my head. "There were 100 things happening that night." She looked at me, and none of them were under my control. I didn't answer, because I knew how difficult those words were for her. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "I still wish I'd gone." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because I wish I had done everything." She squeezed the ticket, even if it wouldn't have changed anything. That was when I finally understood what the tickets were really about. Emma wasn't trying to prove that she could have saved Lily. She was trying to prove that she had been a good mother. She thought a good mother would have taken the train. A good mother wouldn't have stayed beside a frightened 5-year-old because her daughter asked her not to leave. A good mother would have done everything, even when there was no guarantee that anything would work. I looked at her. "You were with her." She nodded. "She asked you to stay." "Yes." "You held her hand." She closed her eyes. "Yes. And when she was scared, the person she wanted was you." Emma started crying again. I moved closer. "You didn't abandon her." She shook her head. "I know, but she didn't sound convinced." So I said it again. "You didn't abandon her." She looked at me. "You stayed." That finally broke something inside her. She leaned against me and cried. Not quietly. Not the way she'd cried over the years when she thought I wasn't looking. She cried like someone who had been holding her breath for 19 years. And I held her. Neither of us tried to fix it. There was nothing to fix. Lily was still gone. That would never change. But for the first time, we knew something we hadn't known before. Emma had not been standing between Lily and the treatment that might have saved her. She had been standing beside her daughter while doctors were already trying to decide whether treatment was possible. The train had never been the answer. It had simply become the symbol of the question Emma couldn't stop asking. And suddenly, I understood why she had never been able to throw away those tickets. She wasn't trying to get somewhere. She was trying to go back to the moment before she knew how the story would end. For the next few days, things between Emma and me were strangely quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. We had finally said the thing we'd both avoided for years, and somehow that made everything feel more fragile. The train tickets were still there. Emma hadn't thrown them away. She kept the newest one in the drawer beside her bed. I knew because I saw it there one morning. I didn't ask about it. I didn't want to turn her grief into another interrogation, but I kept thinking about what she'd said. I wish I'd done everything. That sentence stayed with me, because I realized I had spent 19 years doing something similar. I had built my own version of that night. In mine, I had been too far away. I should have left work sooner. I should have demanded better answers. I should have been there earlier. I should have known. Emma had her train. I had my absence. We had both taken one terrible night and turned it into a lifetime of imaginary decisions. One evening I found Emma sitting at the kitchen table with Lily's photograph. She didn't notice me at first. I sat across from her. "Do you still think about that night every day?" She looked at the photograph. "Not every day." I waited. "Most days." I nodded. "So do I." She looked surprised. "You never told me." "I didn't think I needed to." She smiled sadly. "I thought you didn't remember much." "I remember everything." She looked down. "I don't." "What do you mean?" She touched the photograph. "I remember pieces." "The hospital?" "Yes." "Lily?" "Yes." "The train?" She hesitated. "That part I remember too." She looked at me. "But I don't remember the exact moment I decided not to go." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I remember thinking about it." She swallowed. "I remember the nurse telling me I could travel ahead. But you don't remember deciding." "No." She shook her head. "I just remember Lily waking up and asking me to stay." "I thought about that. You didn't choose not to go." She looked at me. "You stayed with her." "Yes." "That's a choice." "I know. But it isn't the choice I've been blaming myself for." I didn't understand. She explained. "I've been blaming myself for believing I had a choice that night." I stared at her. She continued. "I was terrified. I was exhausted. I didn't know if Lily would still be alive when I got back. I didn't know what the doctors were going to do. I didn't know anything." Her voice became quieter. "I kept thinking that if I had been stronger, I would have known what to do." I reached across the table. "You were her mother, not a doctor." "I know." "You were 5 feet away from your sick child." "I know." "You stayed." She nodded. "That's what I keep forgetting." We sat there quietly. Then she said, "I don't think the tickets were really about the train." "What were they about?" She looked at me. "Being the person I wish I had been." That sentence hit me harder than anything else she'd said. I understood it. She had created a version of herself in her mind. A woman who got on the train. A woman who didn't hesitate. A woman who did everything possible. And every month, she went to the station to meet that imaginary version of herself. I took her hand. "You don't have to be her." She smiled sadly. "I know." "Do you?" She looked at me for a long moment. "I think I'm starting to." A week later, I called the specialist hospital. There was one more question I wanted answered. Not because I thought it would change anything, because I wanted Emma to hear it from someone who had actually been there. The hospital put me in contact with a retired doctor who had worked in the pediatric department around the time Lily was treated. He couldn't remember every detail, but when I gave him Lily's name and the date, he said he remembered the case. We arranged a phone call. Emma sat beside me. The doctor spoke carefully. He explained that Lily had been critically ill. The transfer had been considered because the specialist hospital had resources the local hospital didn't. But by the time the decision was being made, Lily's condition was deteriorating too quickly. He said something I'll never forget. "We never knew whether transport would have been safe." Emma was silent. He continued. "The recommendation was not a promise of recovery. It was an option we were considering while we still had time to consider it." Emma asked, "If I had taken the train, would she have lived?" The doctor was quiet. "No one can honestly tell you that." Emma closed her eyes. He continued. "But I can tell you something else." She opened them. "You did not make a medical decision that night." "What do you mean?" "You stayed with your daughter because she was frightened. The medical team made the decisions about her treatment and transfer." Emma looked down. "You're saying I didn't stop them?" "No." The doctor paused. "From what I can see in the records, the transfer was already being reconsidered before the train would have arrived." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." After the call ended, she didn't speak for several minutes. Then she said, "I think I've been waiting 19 years for someone to say that." I looked at her. "Say what?" "That I didn't decide whether she lived or died." I squeezed her hand. "You didn't." She nodded. "I think I believe you now." For the first time, there was something different in her voice. Not happiness. Not relief exactly. Something quieter, like exhaustion finally beginning to lift. That night, I found the drawer where she'd kept the tickets. There were dozens of them. Some were faded. Some had barely legible dates. I laid them out on the bed. Emma stood in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Looking." She came closer. We counted them. 37. 37 tickets she'd bought over 3 years. 37 times she'd gone back to the same question. I picked up the oldest one. "You really thought this would give you an answer?" She looked at it. "No." "Then why?" She smiled faintly. "Because standing there was the only way I knew how to miss her." I didn't know what to say, so I said the only thing that felt true. "You can miss her without punishing yourself." Emma looked at the tickets. "I don't know how." "You can learn." She looked at me. "Will you?" I nodded. "If you'll let me." She took my hand. "I will." For the first time since I had discovered the tickets, I wasn't interested in where Emma had been going. I understood now. She hadn't been going anywhere. She had been returning to the same moment. And maybe the hardest part wasn't convincing her that the past couldn't be changed. Maybe it was convincing her that she didn't have to keep proving how much she loved a daughter who had already known it. The following month, I noticed Emma hadn't bought a ticket. I didn't say anything at first. I waited. The date came closer. Usually by then I would have seen the charge on our bank account, but there was nothing. No train line notification, no ticket, no trip to the station. For the first time in 3 years, Emma wasn't going. I found her in the kitchen that evening. "You're not buying one this month?" She looked at me. "No." "Why?" She smiled faintly. "I think I already know the answer." I knew what she meant, but I didn't want to assume. "What answer?" She looked toward the window. "That I can't go back." I nodded. "No." She was quiet for a moment. "But I still miss her." "I know. I don't think that's ever going to stop." "I don't think it should." She looked at me. "Do you still miss her?" "Every day." She smiled. "Then maybe we can miss her together." That was the first time either of us had said it like that. Not your grief, not my guilt, ours. A few days later, we drove to Ashford. Emma hadn't asked me to. I suggested it. She was nervous when we arrived. We parked near the station. For a moment, neither of us got out. Then Emma said, "I haven't been here with you in 19 years. "I know." We walked inside. The station looked different. New signs, new benches, different advertisements. But the platform was still there. Emma looked at the clock. 6:08. I could see her hands trembling. "You don't have to stay," I said. She shook her head. "I want to." We stood together. 6:12, 6:13, 6:14. Then the train appeared. Emma watched it approach. For 3 years she'd stood on that platform alone and imagined a different version of herself stepping aboard. This time she didn't move. She just watched. The train stopped. The doors opened. People got off. People got on. Then the doors closed. The train pulled away. Emma exhaled. That was it. I looked at her. "What?" "The moment." She wiped her eyes. "I always thought I needed to take the train to finally finish this." She looked at the tracks. "But I don't." I took her hand. "No." She smiled through her tears. "I think I just needed someone to stand here with me." We stayed for a few more minutes. Then we left. No dramatic goodbye. No promise that she would never feel guilty again. Just 2 people walking away from a platform that had held them emotionally for 19 years. When we got home, Emma went upstairs. A few minutes later, she came back down carrying the box of train tickets. She put it on the table. There were 37 of them. She looked through each one. Some were faded. Some had curled at the edges. Some were barely readable. She didn't throw them away. Instead, she put them back into the box. Then she closed the lid. I looked at her. "You're keeping them?" She nodded. "Why?" "Because they were part of my life." She touched the box. "But they don't get to decide what happens next." I smiled. "That sounds like progress." She laughed softly. "Don't ruin it." I laughed too. For a while, we stood there in the kitchen. Then Emma said, "Do you remember what Lily used to do when she was scared?" I smiled. "She'd hold your finger." Emma nodded. "She wouldn't hold your whole hand." "No, just one finger." "She liked knowing you were there without making a big deal about it." Emma smiled. "She was funny." She was. We stood there remembering her. Not the hospital, not the train, Not the last night, just Lily. The way she laughed, the way she hated peas, the way she insisted on wearing the same yellow sweater 3 days in a row, the way she used to fall asleep halfway through movies. For the first time in years, we talked about her without talking about how she died, and I realized that was what Emma had been missing. She hadn't been afraid of forgetting Lily. She had been afraid that if she stopped punishing herself, it would somehow mean she loved her less. But grief doesn't work that way. You don't prove love by staying in pain forever. You prove it by remembering the person, not just the moment you lost them. That night, Emma came into our bedroom carrying the old photograph of Lily. She put it on the bedside table. "I'm keeping this here," I smiled. "I like that." She looked at me. "Do you think it's okay?" "Yeah," she nodded. Then she climbed into bed. A few minutes later, she reached over and took my hand. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. The next morning, I checked the bank account. There was no train line charge, no ticket, nothing. And for the first time since I discovered those purchases, I wasn't wondering where my wife was going. I knew. She had been going back to the same place for 3 years because part of her had never left that night. She had stood on that platform over and over, holding an imaginary version of the choice she thought might have saved our daughter. But the truth was simpler and harder. There had never been a guarantee. There had never been a magic train. There had only been a frightened mother, a sick little girl, doctors trying to make impossible decisions, and two parents who had spent 19 years imagining all the ways they could have done things differently. I couldn't change what happened to Lily. Emma couldn't either. But we could stop turning her death into a punishment. And maybe that was what letting go really meant. Not forgetting, not pretending it didn't hurt. Just finally understanding that loving someone who died doesn't require you to keep hurting yourself for them. Emma never bought another train ticket, but every October we still go to Ashford. We stand on the platform at 6:15. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. And when the train arrives, we let it leave without us, because we finally understand something we should have understood 19 years ago. Some trains are meant to take you somewhere, and some are only there to remind you that you don't have to go back.